Hey drawing friends, we're going to draw the tulip today and it's going to be awesome. They have so much personality. You should definitely Google Tulip Mania. They're pretty amazing little flowers. I think there's like 3,000 species of them. So if you don't know yet, we are doing a draw along on Instagram. So if you want to post your drawings or just see what other people are posting, here's the hashtag. It's called Watts Floral Series. And yeah, go check it out. There's already some great artwork on there. As usual, all of the supplies can be found down in the description box, and every single time I post one of these videos, there's a PDF that goes along with it. So you can use that to copy and help you kind of draw along with me. One more thing, I'm Sarah Watts. I should introduce myself on here more often. I'm an illustrator and textile designer, and now an online educator, and maybe now even a YouTuber. So yeah, let's get started. Okay, so if you follow the rest of these videos, you'll know that I always print up some reference, and these I licensed from Shutterstock. And yeah, there's just beautiful tulips. I like to print up my reference in black and white. It just makes it a little easier to focus on the line work and not so much the color. So we've got a few pieces of tulip reference. Hello, is that not the cutest tulip ever? Oh my gosh, I can't even... And look how, okay, so you can go from this cute little baby to this like fiery looking tulip. Like what? That tulip's awesome. So anyway, they're just so cool. There's even one called the Queen of the Night. That's my favorite one. It looks like the tulips that you would find in like a vampire's garden. It's pretty awesome. Now, one thing I wanted to point out about tulips is on the top, you'll notice there's only 3 petals in the inside and then 3 petals on the outside. These are actually sepals. They look a lot like petals, so we just call them petals on tulips. But anyway, so you'll see 6 petals on the tulip, and they're all very symmetrical. And I think that's really helpful to know when you're drawing them from the side, which is the typical view that you see a tulip. Oh goodness, that paper looks like a Wolverine got to it. I should definitely use a different one. Okay, so for the tulip, we're going to use this as an opportunity to practice elegant line work and overlapping petals or overlapping shapes, because it's really useful for like when you're drawing, you know, a garden with lots of different flowers in it. And it's also useful for when you draw roses, because roses are just like tons of petals just like hugging each other. It's very confusing. You don't know what's happening, but we'll get to those later. So when I see this tulip, usually you see tulips from the side view. It's just the way it goes. I don't know why. But you've got this cup shape, right? And what I typically do is make a leaf kind of shape or a teardrop shape. And then the side view of that teardrop shape might look like something like this. Okay? So you could be like, cool, there's a stylized tulip. I'm done. See you later, right? Or you can, add a little bit more detail to it. So, like, for example, I like to ruffle the top edges with a little bit of a scalloped edge. And then I like to bring this, like, as if it's wrapping around, this edge will come down here and another one here. Right? And then also you can give it a center line. And whenever you're drawing things in nature or anything like living, it creates a nice feeling of life by just adding a lot of curved lines and trying to avoid super straight lines. And so you could give this a little bit of a curve. Okay. And then I would go on with my stem. And I tend to draw things a bit stylized. So this is a good opportunity to get used to your S-curves. So one of the things when you're learning drawing or practicing drawing is that you kind of want to get a good practice of doing curves and like flowy lines, right? So this is a really good time to practice that. And a good exercise to get used to getting that hand control of curvy lines in general is to draw something curvy over and over again and try to match the same shape over and over again on the page. So for example, you know, you could do something like this over and over again and just fill up a page. It's kind of like, you know, drawing ASMR. It's very therapeutic. But that's one way to get used to kind of getting, you know, that hand control of long, elegant lines. Oops. Okay. So that becomes very useful. So like when you go to draw the leaf, you could, you know, get used to using that whole hand wrist movement and really get a nice flow of a leaf. And then you can put the center line in. Now you can also just have a simple leaf that's got a very slight S-curve. Okay. And you can also do like a bent leaf. Let's try that one again. Right? So I would practice doing a lot of leaves. One thing that I think is super fun to do is when you're practicing long leaves like this, what you can do is make your own leaf. Wow, Sarah, that's an amazing leaf. But this is a very good technique to try out. So what you do is you just, you know, draw a long slender leaf with Sharpie, and then you do this same drawing on the other side. It works really good with computer paper so you can kind of see it bleed through and know where to put your artwork. Then you cut it out and you just bend it around and notice how a line flips as it goes through to the underside, right? See how that totally, you're like, oh, when you see a leaf that simply, you're like, okay, so all I gotta do, here, let me see if I can practice this. So let's see. You've got, wait, right here. And then you have the back edge. And then you have this, right? So you've got this triangle shape right here. And then the center line of that leaf. And then you notice that this kind of curves down. And you're like, wait a second, this line continues here, right? So you don't draw a line here. You can kind of skip over, make a light line to know where you're going. But if you thought about all of this as a translucent piece of paper, you would see this line here, right? And then you just erase that and continue it here. And then you'll see that this line continues here. So, and you can really get, you know, really creative with it and see how it kind of interacts when you bend it in different ways. But that's just a nice little trick that I find useful for drawing leaves. All right, so here is the drawing that I came up with for my tulip. And one thing I wanted to note is how you can easily obtain the overlapping shapes in the leaves. So I'll just sketch that out really quick. So anytime you want to create the illusion of overlapping shapes, you would draw them how they are, and then depending on which one you want in the front, you would just erase the lines of the one behind it where they intersect. So let's say I want this leaf to be in the front, then I'll erase the lines of this one, and then when you go to ink it, you just ink what's left over, and it gives that illusion of this leaf being in front of this one. And same thing with, you know, anytime you're drawing, like if we drew a tulip from above, you know, like let's pretend like the tulip is on its last leg of life and you just kind of see the petals really opening up. And then you've got those center petals. So you just draw everything how it is without any, like how it would exist without anything behind it. And then you erase the lines that you want to be behind the foreground objects. Okay, so if this was the top view of a tulip that's really blossomed, then you would erase these to make these outermost petals appear to be behind the innermost petals. And then you would ink what's left over. Okay. Okay, now I've got to do a closed tulip from above just because you have to see it. It's so cute. So I usually, make the disc shape or the saucer shape that you would see from above. And then you've got like this squeezed triangle. And then if you want, you can kind of add those scalloped edges or just leave them smooth, either one. And then you would see the innermost petals kind of in here. And then you would erase. They're very ocean-like. Like you've got your petals that look very seaweed-like, and then the tulip looks a lot like some kind of clam or, mermaid vessel. All right, so let's start inking our final sketch. All right, here it is. So this time I'm using the Tombow Fudenosuke brush pen in the hard tip because my kids took off with my mono drawing pen, and it happens. And what I'll do is I'll just use the very tip of it. It still has a very consistent line weight, and then I'll kind of, turn to the side to get that brush pen effect. These are brush pens. They're like a felt tip brush pen. They're super awesome for calligraphy. All right, so I'm going to start with the scalloped edge, and I usually put that scalloped edge like kind of on the top third of the tulip. You don't have to put it in there. Some tulips don't have that at all, but I just like how it adds a little bit of interest. Okay, and I made this petal a bit spoon-shaped. All right, and then these outside. Okay. Now you might see this petal kind of curving around. Depending on if you're kind of looking from the flower slightly above. And then for the stem, I don't have any leaves covering up the stem, so I'm going to go ahead and ink it how it is. All right, and then this leaf back here will go behind the stem, and when you do that, you just want to make sure that it picks up right where it left off. That way you mentally kind of associate this as the same leaf instead of there being a disjointed line right here. Okay. We're trying to, you know, create the illusion that what we're drawing is real, even if it's stylized, just so that it's a believable environment to the viewer. I love over-explaining things, and hopefully that just makes me a good teacher. All right. This one I'm having kind of weave in between, like behind the stem and in front of this back leaf. Okay. And then it will poke out a little bit more over here. Sometimes I go off of my sketch, and that's something that you can certainly, you know, you can just stick with your sketch or go off of it, doesn't matter. Sometimes you change your mind, you know? And I'm going to make this one slightly curved. So that, very seaweed-like. All right, and you could add some stippling in onto the petals. You know, if you want your center line to not be so, you know, harsh of a line, you can make it more delicate with just stippling in that feeling of a line going through the petal. And for this, I'm kind of imagining that there's a slight gradient in the pattern on the tulip. So I'm just kind of making the bottom have some texture and then having it fade out a tiny bit. And stippling is just a great little, you know, technique to use when you're doing just black and white artwork, so that you have another, it's kind of like, you know, if you use cross hatching or regular hatching, stippling is just another thing to kind of give yourself some shading options without having to actually use thick lines to do that. Alright, so like in my other videos, I'm going to speed up the clip so that you can see me add some thickness to some of the design to give it a little more interest, and I'll be back. Okay, so there's the finished black and white drawing. You know, normally I would take something like this and bring it into Photoshop, or add some ink or, you know, marker to it afterwards, just to kind of play around. Another little trick you can do with these drawings is, if your printer can handle thicker paper, you can scan the drawing and print it out over and over again on watercolor paper and practice on the same artwork. And also wanted to show you how I added some color to some of these designs. So this one is Tombow dual brush pens, and then here I used the Dr. P.H. Martin's Hydrus liquid watercolor, and just kind of dropped in different colors while the water was still kind of wet. And then here I used the Tombow dual brush pens. And this was also a mix of both Tombow dual brush pens and the liquid watercolor. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If so, shoot me a thumbs up and a subscribe. I have so many more ideas for this channel and I cannot wait to show them to you. All right, I'll see you later. Bye.